Hey, what's happening, my fearless networking friends? Todd Falcone here. Welcome back to another episode. Today's a special episode. I'm excited to be here with you guys. We release new episodes each and every Monday, and typically the purpose is to help people that are involved in the network marketing and direct selling profession how to achieve success in our amazing profession. And most of the times I'm popping in here, I'm spending time just, firing out a subject matter for however long I'm talking about it and giving you guys some value. And always want to give value. And today is a special bit of value. I've got a great friend of mine who I met, about 17, 18 years ago, who lived in my neighborhood when I was living up in Washington State. We went out and had some teriyaki together and became great friends. And he is an author, former pastor, amazing speaker, has written a whole bunch of books. I got actually a couple of books in front of me, Art of Influence and 12 Pillars. Pulled these out of my bookshelves. We actually had a great conversation the other day about book writing style, which was a fun conversation. And we're just going to have a chat today. So I've got Chris Widener with me today. Chris, what's happening, brother? How you doing, man?
Thanks for having me on, Todd. I was thinking about the first time we ever met, and you kept saying it was teriyaki, and I kept thinking, I thought it was Thai food. But what I remember is it's in that little strip mall, and there is a teriyaki place right next to the Thai place. And as I picture us sitting there, you're right. We were in the teriyaki restaurant, not the Thai restaurant.
And you're right. They were right next to one another.
Right next door. And I go to the Thai, or I used to go when I lived there, to that Thai restaurant all the time. So every time you said teriyaki, I'm like, no, Todd, it's not teriyaki. And then I pictured myself, no, the inside I'm seeing is the one of the teriyaki. So yeah. I stand corrected, my friend.
It's all good, man. Teriyaki or Thai, either way, man. Hey, so my listeners, followers, so this episode, and I don't know where you guys are at. I mean, you might be on the podcast right now. If you're listening on audio, the rest of the details of this episode, you'll find it at toddfalcone.com /episode 97, right? And you may be on YouTube. And if you're on YouTube, pop over to the site, toddfalcone.com /episode 97. If you're on the site, you're on the right spot. So, but I just wanted to get together with Chris today and have a chat. And he's got kind of an interesting story. I mean, he worked with Jim Rohn for a long time. And I know you guys have got to be familiar with Jim Rohn. There's one quote that I always use. Like, Jim's got so many amazing quotes, but probably my favorite quote from Jim is, formal education will make you a living. Self-education will make you a fortune. And Chris, how did that, I don't even know if we've ever talked about that. How did you even get to working with Jim?
So I was a pastor, and from 1988 till 2002, and I was speaking, as well, mostly secular, General Electric, Microsoft, Cisco Systems, Harvard Business School, stuff like that. And then John Maxwell had been a pastor. He left to go speak and write full time, and they hired me to ghostwrite his nationally syndicated column in the early 2000s. So for about 18 months, I ghostwrote his column, which went into those business journals all across the country. And I had also gotten to know Kyle Wilson, who was the president of Jim Rohn International. And Kyle saw that I was working with John, and they wanted to write a thing called the Jim Rohn 1-Year Success Plan. So Kyle called me up in September of 2002 and asked me if I'd be willing to do that with Jim, and I said absolutely. And so starting in October of 2002 through October 2003, Jim and I and Kyle wrote the Jim Rohn 1-Year program, which we then eventually condensed down into a little book called 12 Pillars that you talked about a little bit earlier. And so that's how I ended up working with Jim. I spent the last 7 years of his life working with him. We wrote the 1-Year program. We did the 2004 weekend leadership event, which was Jim and Brian Tracy, Dennis Waitley, Charlie Tremendous Jones, Jerry Clark was one of the guys there. So I think that was the greatest personal development weekend ever done. And I was the MC. I wasn't like one of the main speakers, so I don't have to sound biased, but it really turned out to be a great deal. And from there, I ended up working with Zig Ziglar a little bit, had a TV show together, but it was just really, it was just a blessing, really. Sometimes people say, how do you become a successful speaker? I said, it's just a 3-step process. first of all, have John Maxwell call you, then have Jim Rohn call you, then have Zig Ziglar call you. Once that happens, it's pretty easy. So I've been blessed and really fortunate to be able to have kind of an inside peek into some really great guys.
Let's actually talk about that for a second. Talking about being how do you become an exceptional speaker? Because, you and you and I are both professional speakers. We speak on the platform all the time, or at least now we're speaking on the virtual platform.
We're speaking on the Zoom all the time now.
Yeah. But there's a lot of people that are so scared to death to speak. What some people are more afraid of dying than they are of getting on stage in front of an audience. But what would you say? This would be by the way, you guys, I have no idea where we're going. There's no pre-planned questions. We're just gonna rip it. But you were a pastor, which you're obviously in front of your congregation all the time. What advice or tips would you give for people to be a better speaker and to improve their platform skills? Because I think if you're involved in network marketing, you need to have presentation skills. You need to be able to be comfortable in front of an audience, because at some point somebody's going to call you and say, hey man, we need you to speak at the national conference and talk for 10 minutes or whatever it is. So yep. I would love to hear, because I've seen you many, many times. You are an amazing speaker, presenter, professional at all levels. And so what advice would you have for people to improve their presentation and platform skills?
So the first thing I would tell you to wipe out the fear is nobody expects you to be good. If you are not a professional speaker, no one is sitting there thinking, I can't believe this person is not a very good speaker. What they're doing is they're sitting there going, I'm glad it's her up there and not me. Because you're right, you quoted that old scientific study that Jerry Seinfeld made famous. He's the one that said, next time you're at a funeral, most people would rather be in the casket than giving the eulogy, citing that study. And the fact is, most people would rather you be up on stage than them be up on stage. So they're not judging you like you think they're judging you. So just wipe away that fear. If Todd and I show up to give a speech, we darn well better be good, because we're being paid for it. We are professional speakers. Right? If your cousin who knows a little bit about plumbing fixes your toilet and it doesn't go right, you're kind of like, I should have hired a professional. If you hire a professional plumber to fix your toilet and it goes wrong, you're mad because he's a professional. So the first thing is just wipe out any fear that people are sitting there judging you. Second thing I would say is know your stuff. Know your stuff, know your stuff, know your stuff. And I'll give you a story. I had gotten done doing like 30 minutes on something. I don't even remember what it was, but stuff I typically talk about. And a guy comes up to me. It was in Seattle, actually. A guy comes up to me and he says, I'm just amazed that you could talk for 30 minutes with no notes. It's unbelievable. And I said, well, you could too. I could never do that. I said, well, what do you do for a living? He said, I work at Boeing. I said, what are you? He says, I'm an aeronautical engineer. So what are you working on? He said, I'm working on the wings for the new 777. So this was a while back, right? And I said, oh, okay. So like, what do you mean? Figuring out lift and, how long it needs to be and how wide it needs? Absolutely. And I said, perfect. If I said to you right now, here's the microphone. I was still holding the microphone. Here's the microphone. I need you to give me 30 minutes on the design of a wing. Could you do it? And he said, oh yeah, easy. And I said, there you go.
Yeah.
Stuff. You know your stuff. Everybody listening here has something that they could go talk 30 minutes on with no notes. Might be raising kids, might be coaching baseball, might be snowboarding, might be knitting, might be whatever, but you could do it. And the reason why is because you know your stuff cold. And then the third thing I would say is just make sure you structure your speech right and you could go with a variation of the old standby 3 points in a poem, right? I wouldn't say use a poem, but I mean, really, basically every speech is an intro, an exit at the end. So you have to have a beginning, you have to have an end, and 3 or 4 points. Tell the point, make a factual reference about the point, tell a story to illustrate it. And if you could put those 6 to 8 pieces together and you really know your stuff, you can whiz through any speech you need to. I really honestly believe that. In essence, the baseline of it. Obviously, the last thing is practice, 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 practice. I've given 2,500 speeches in my life, and I still am testing new material every now and then. And if it works, I keep it. If it doesn't, because while I'm giving my speech, I'm looking at the audience. Like I remember about 6 years ago, I don't remember what the joke was, but I had a really funny line. At least I thought it was funny.
Yeah.
And I mean, I thought it was funny. I told it like 6 times in a row and nobody laughed. And I'm literally up there thinking, how come these people aren't laughing? This is funny stuff. While I'm giving my speech, I'm sure you do that too, Todd. You're thinking, carrying on a conversation with yourself about the audience while you're speaking. And I just realized it's not funny. So I quit doing it 6, 7 years ago. And I don't even remember what the joke was. I just remember thinking that joke should kill, but it never did. So I dumped it. I perfected the speech, right? You use what works, you throw out what doesn't.
Oh, now, okay. So I'm so glad that you just said all that, because listen, you guys, those of you that plug into me on a regular basis, you hear me say like a broken record, repeat what works, delete what doesn't, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Chris just gave an example. He's like, throws out a joke, is not as well received. He's like, okay, I'm not going to do that one. I mean, I remember a time I was in Florida doing something and I just made something up and the audience went ballistic over it. I'm like, oh my gosh, I better remember to do that one in the future, right? And the other thing he said, which you guys hear me say all the time, is practice, practice, practice. Dude, I go to events and I might use the same, slide deck, 2 weeks, 3 weeks in a row, different audiences, as I'm sure, it's not the same exact presentation, but I'll, okay, there's the slide deck. I created it. And I only do it for me. I do it for the audience, not for me. And I'll be in my hotel room practicing that morning, practicing the timing, thinking about what I'm going to say around that content. So, I mean, you just gave this audience gold, absolute gold. I mean, and simple too. It's not hard. And one of the things you talk about, intro, point, close. I remember, listening years ago to some of John Childers stuff, and, he talks about chunking, which is so powerful, right? Where people look at a 30-minute presentation like, oh my gosh, 30 minutes. And well, not really. It's like you're opening, point, close. So it's like, a few 5-minute chunks, right? And that's another thing, which I just want to.
Well, I'll give you just a little strategy for people that want is to mix it up. You want to use a little bit of story, a little bit of fact, a little bit. So you could say point number one, 67%, and I'm just making this up. I don't know if these are statistics. 67% of all network marketers drop out in their first 2 years. Okay, so there's a fact. That's a statistic. Well, actually, let me back up. Your point might be you need to stick it out. Okay, so that's your point. Point number one, you need to stick it out. 67% of all networkers, and again, I'm making that number up, quit in the first 2 years. Let me tell you the story about Jerry. Jerry got into network marketing. So here's what we've done. We've said, here's the point. Here's a fact about the point. Here's a story about the point. And you're going to create you're making their brain jump around, and that keeps them engaged. So that's a really simple strategy. Make your point. Give a statistic or a fact or a quote, Winston Churchill said, But let me tell you about my life or Jerry's life or Joe's life or Susie's life, and tell a story. And that's a great little technique for using to build your speech out.
Beautiful. Let's go back to one of the first things you said, or I said in the intro, and that is, and I actually didn't know this about you until really like a few years after we met. Like I knew you as a leadership speaker connected to Jim Rohn, but did not know that you were a former pastor. And I think probably a few years later that I found out we were brothers in Christ. So how did you get into that? How did you always know you were going to do that, or that fall?
Not many people thought I'd end up a pastor, Todd. In fact, I'll tell you this: at our 10th high school family reunion, our 10th high school reunion, we show up. We were down at the West Coast Hotel there in Bellevue, right there on Auto Row, and we all show up, a couple hundred of us, and spouses and everything, and we ate dinner and we did our little program, and they said, okay, now it's time to vote for most changed male and most changed female. However, we all know who the most changed male is. It's Chris. We're not even going to vote for most changed male. That's how bad I was growing up. Like, they didn't even take a vote for most changed male. They just did most changed female. I grew up, my dad died when I was 4. We were living in Sandpoint Country Club over in North Seattle. He was severely underinsured. That created a downward spiral. I ended up living in 28 homes, went to 11 different schools, shipped off to live with relatives twice, once in the 4th grade, once in the 9th grade. Got involved in drugs, alcohol starting in the 6th grade. Really had a bad upbringing. Got in trouble a lot, made my money scalping tickets at the Seahawks and Mariners games on the street corner. Used to bet the ponies at Long Acres Horse Track every weekend it was open. So going in the wrong direction, right? I ended up, short story, I got invited to go to a little Lutheran church in North Bend to the youth group. I spent the night with my biggest pot smoking buddy, Danny Carpenter. And Sunday morning, his mom threw the door open and said, "Get up, we're going to Sunday school." And I literally had no clue what she meant by the term Sunday school. I had no religious upbringing, no background, no nothing. I didn't even know what the term meant. And so we ended up going there, and there was a good old boy from Montana, a guy named Sam Samuelson, who was my youth minister. And he put his size 11 cowboy boots where I needed them to kick me in the right direction. And he also taught me about God. You know, you're a talented guy. God made you. He has a plan for your life. You need to find what that plan is. And it just gave me a greater sense of purpose and understanding my place and role in the world. And it was just perfect timing. I needed a male role model. My dad had died. My grandpas were dead and gone. My brother was 13 years older than me. I didn't see him much. So I never really had a lot of male role models. And that's one of the things this youth minister did. And summer before my senior year on Lake Chelan, I was on a canoe retreat with my youth group on Lake Chelan, became a Christian, and then got called into the ministry as a youth minister in northern New Jersey. Graduated college, moved to Mendham, New Jersey, where I served 3 years as a youth minister. And in an interesting turn of events, as God sort of leads our lives, I ended up in this little tiny church. But it was filled with some of the greatest business people in the world. My first business mentor was at the time, he was the senior vice president of marketing for Mars Candies. He was operating out of Hackettstown. Their main is down in McLean, Virginia. But within about 6-8 years, he was the CEO of Mars Candies and moved back down to Virginia. So the number 2 guy at Prudential, a former quarterback in the NFL, the former CEO of Sealand, all these guys were in my church and had kids in my youth group and took me under their wing as a young man, rough around the edges. And that became very formulative in the future when I left, you know, being a pastor full time. And as I look back over my life, I just see all these little pieces coming together, you know, and at the time you don't know what's coming together. You don't know how it fits into the piece of the puzzle. But when you look back in hindsight, you go, oh, that's what God was doing in my life. There's where he was taking me. This is what he wanted me to do.
Wow. Wow. Well, I guess that'll put you in the platform. I mean, when you become a pastor, do they give you like speaker training or?
Some do. It depends on what seminary you go to and all that kind of stuff. But, you know, the guy who really kicked my career off he ran the largest sales team at Cisco Systems. And he was in my church. And he ran worldwide. It was called Worldwide Channels. It was the biggest and most successful sales team. He's now like the number 3 guy at Hewlett Packard. He went from there to Avaya to Hewlett and a number of other different ones. But he hired me to come to your town. It was one of my first paid speaking engagements outside the church. Went down to Bend. And he rented a whole big thing at the golf course. We took golf lessons. We played rounds of golf. And then he had me do a couple speeches on leadership and sales. And that was one of my first big ones. And it was just somebody kind of opening a door for me. And I've had that happen a lot. I think we all kind of, if we look back over our life, we see people who come into our lives and they just kind of push a door open that we could have never pushed open ourselves. They give us an opportunity to, you know, speak to their company or to, you know, do some work with them or whatever. And it's amazing to look back at how it all gets orchestrated.
Yeah, no doubt. No, that's beautiful. Beautiful. So let's, you called me, I don't know, a couple months ago and said you were putting together a fellowship of Christian network marketers organization. And I was immediately like, oh, that's cool. Like, yeah, I want to know about that. And so, you know, I'm on the board there with you. And what I'd like for you to do is, for those of you that are, you know, in network marketing, that are Christians, that are men and women of faith, I think this is an organization you want to be aware of. It's just really right now just beginning, and maybe you can spend a few minutes talking about that, and we'll wrap up today's show.
Yeah, absolutely. I was surprised that there had never been one. I sort of just randomly mentioned it. I think the way the whole thing started was I was talking to Donna and Tomas, our friends, and I think I said, is there an association for Christian network marketers? And they said, no, but that would be a great idea. So I started calling around and asking, you know, different people that I knew, top income earners who I knew were people of faith, and all of them said that would be fantastic. So it's all in a 501c3. It's not a for-profit organization. And we have a private Facebook group right now. We're just launching it. We've been going for about a week and a half or something. We've started telling people about it, and we've got just great board members from all across the industry. We've got men, women, young, old, black, white, Asian. I always say I want our board to look like heaven. Heaven's going to have a lot of different kinds of people in it, right? So I wanted our board to look like it. Tonight we're bringing on our first international board member, a really dynamic woman from the Philippines who has more. I'd never heard of her, and they said, "Yeah, but you
Donna.
should." Huh? Yeah.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
great. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I met Donna in the Philippines about 9 years ago at an event that I was speaking at.
Yeah, I have a call with her tonight. She's going to be instrumental in helping us go international. We've already gone international. We've already started having people from Canada, the UK, Australia, Philippines. So it's just exciting because my goal for this is to just be a place. Our motto is your family for faith and freedom. We just want to create a place within the industry. It doesn't matter what company you're in. Doesn't matter if you make $100,000 a month or $100 a month. It really doesn't matter. We want to challenge you. We want to encourage you. The board members are doing they're doing time every day, giving of themselves. Todd, a guy named Chad, Rod, top income earners, Cindy Walters on Fridays, Faithful Fridays. Simon Chan is on our board. He does something every Sunday morning. So it's just really a cool place to go and get encouragement, to build up your faith, to be inspired. Eventually I see us having, in-person conferences. It's just a great place filled with some great people. Nobody's making a bunch of money off of this. It's just a place where we can say, hey, let's get together and encourage each other and help each other out. Yeah,
no, I think it's a great concept. And, as long as there's a lot of people in network marketing that have faith. But I remember when you called me, you're like, hey, do you know if there's any networking organizations that are Christian based? And I'm like, no, I don't.
Yeah. It just surprised me.
Yeah, no. And so, no, that's beautiful. So, look, where do people find out information about it?
Yeah, so they can go to Networkers, and that's plural, networkersfellowship.com. And right now, the first 1,000 people that join, we're doing a one-time lifetime payment. You never pay another nickel for your membership. $147. You get we'll ship you a bunch of books. You get a copy of Todd's Fearless Networking, a few copies of my books, some Jim Rohn stuff. It's a great little package. I've actually had a number of people who joined who then personally wrote to me and said, thanks for all these books. This is great. Really good stuff. And so they can go to networkersfellowship.com, register there. They get an email, tells them how to get into the private Facebook group. And we're doing stuff there 2 or 3 times every day. It's just exciting, very, very excited, and appreciate so many people like yourself, Todd, who are giving of yourselves to be on that advisory board, to help advise, to pitch in on the teachings and those kinds of things. Just really, really, it's great to see how God's putting the whole thing together.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. And a lot of great people on the board, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of amazing people as part of the organization. So
I think if we were to look at the board members, I bet the board members have over 2 million people in their downlines. I mean, this is the level and the quality of the people who are in this group. Not only successful in the business, but really just wonderful people. About half of them I didn't even know. They were referred to me. Oh, you need to talk to her because she's a great Christian gal. She's really good in her business. And so I'm getting to meet all these new people, and I'm just astounded by the quality of people there are.
Yeah. No, it's definitely a great board, and looking forward to seeing a lot of people join the organization as well. So Chris, I appreciate you for spending time with my audience today, and we'll have to go have some Thai food next time.
Yeah, next time we'll go to the Thai food. But no, thanks, Todd, for helping me get this word out there for people who'd like a little extra encouragement. It's going to be a great place for them. So I appreciate you.
Yeah, and God knows we could all use it right now, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. For sure. Well, guys, again, I don't know where you're catching me. You might be here. I don't know. Maybe you're on the podcast and listening on audio, which is absolutely beautiful. Love that. Make sure you rate the podcast, by the way. Hopefully a good rating. And if you want to catch more on this episode and other details, you want to head over to toddfalcone.com/episode 97. toddfalcone.com/episode 97. If you're on YouTube, pop over there as well. Love you guys. Appreciate you again. Chris, thanks so much for being here. Thank you. That's a wrap. We'll see you on the next episode. Have an amazing week, you guys. Until next time, we'll see you.